I was just going to say we could start with a Star Trek trivia question.
Sure.
If you
Go
wanted.
for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Let me see a random one here.
Is this just the original series?
I can keep. I was going to keep it to the original series.
Okay.
Since that's our MO. What was Landru's process for controlling the natives of Beta 3 called? A. Harvesting. B. Assimilating. C. Absorbing. Or D. Collecting.
Put a 5-year-old kid in a game with me, he's going to learn a life lesson.
I agree with almost everything Greg said. And I
Nah.
still...
Welcome to A Piece of the Action. I'm Micah.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Greg.
And we are going through and giving our thoughts on some of the most rated games on Board Game Geek. And this week we are taking a look at Board Game Pandemic. This is a game that came out in 2008 by designer Matt Leacock, and really a very popular game, one of the few games that I personally own. Like usual, Eric and Greg sat down, played it together, and have now compiled all of their vast intellectual thoughts on the topic and are
Everything there is to know.
Everything there is to know on the subject of pandemic, and are ready to share that with us. So let's go ahead and get into it. First of all, I guess my only regret with this game is that I wish that we could maybe do something a little bit more topical, but as outdated as the subject of a global pandemic is, we'll go ahead and talk about it.
And if anybody's watching this in the future, Micah just made a joke about COVID-19. So we're in the midst of it right now, which is why that's rip-roaringly funny.
Yeah, you can tell. So go ahead and sum up for us. I guess, Eric, you seem like you've got a lot to say today. So why don't you sum up for us what it is that the Board Game Pandemic is all about, first of all?
Pandemic is a cooperative game about curing 4 different diseases before time runs out. It's a lot of ways to lose and only one way to win. The way to win is you have to find 4 cures, and you lose by a number of different ways, running out of the deck or running out of cubes, just disease cubes, things like that. But it's probably one of the most thematic games that we've discussed so far, in that it really does feel like you're going around to different locations on a global map and curing diseases and trying to find cures.
Okay. And I think you guys played, right? You guys just played the regular standard version of Pandemic, right? Because I think just like the other games we've talked about so far, Catan and Carcassonne, there are a lot of expansions for it. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a remake a few years ago that updated some stuff. Mostly just components, right, Greg?
No, they actually, every year, they've been doing a remake of Pandemic. So, and I can't remember what it was. It's some convention that travels around the globe, and they honor that city that they're in by making a pandemic on it. So, like the first big one that I recall was like Pandemic Iberia, which is based in like Spain. And then there's like the Rising Tide, which is like the one based in the Netherlands. The newest one coming out is based upon the fall of Rome. There's like one based on the Cthulhu mythos. There's
fictional ones too.
Legacy. Yeah. There's the legacy versions of them. I mean, there's a few expansions. I think there's 2 or 3, but mostly it's just remakes.
But what I mean is when they remade the base game, was there any updates to the rules there, or was it just? I thought it was just.
I mean, different editions of the game, the base Pandemic. I don't think the rules got changed. Yeah, I mean, I have the old wooden cube version, the newer version.
Yeah, that's the one we played.
Plastic translucent cubes, but for the most part, it's the same game.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, Eric, you touched on it already, but the first thing I want to talk about then is how well it did handling its theme. You said that you really got the feeling that you were going around fighting a global pandemic. How did it accomplish that? What did it do in terms of whatever's at its disposal, the gameplay, the mechanics, the other aesthetic elements to contribute to that. What would you guys say?
Yeah, well, you actually play a role in this one. So you play a character. You have a single meeple, as opposed to the previous games we've discussed, where it's kind of your role is abstracted in the game. This one, you really do play a character, and you get to choose which role. Actually, you randomly choose which role. You know, whether you're a researcher or a medic or something along those lines, each with their own special power. And then you travel a world map, either by driving or taking flights, charter flights or direct flights, things like that. And then you take 4 actions, and those 4 actions are, they can be, well, you take up to 4 actions, and those 4 actions can be anything as, including driving and moving around, curing cubes, or finding cures to diseases. So the reason it's thematic is because it's actually, and the theme works, is you're on a map of the world. The cities that you're going to are real cities, and you're playing a character doing things that real people would do. So in that sense, it gets the theme pretty good.
Okay. Greg, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for sure this is the most thematic game that we've played so far between Catan and Carcassonne and Pandemic. I would say it's a very high-level theme in that I don't necessarily feel like I'm curing diseases, but it does do a good job of feeling like crisis management. So, I mean, for example, I think it could be rethemed as firefighters fighting fire in a forest somewhere, and you have to go to this location to put out this fire that's stoked up, you know. So I would say it does a good job of evoking that feel of crisis management. And yeah, the disease theme works for that. I think the pandemic theme works.
Okay. What about, it would seem to me that an obvious aspect of it that would contribute to the theme would be the fact that something that I imagine we'll get into more details as we go along, but this is the first cooperative game that we've talked about. It seems like it's definitely one of the most well-known or most popular co-op games. And it feels like there aren't like co-op, I mean, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like co-op games are vastly outnumbered by competitive games in the market, that a co-op game is not really the normal thing, but certainly it would seem that just the fact that it's co-op, the dynamic that would create at the table would play into that theme, has sort of been my personal experience with it. But what do you guys think as far as that goes?
I think I might disagree with what you said that there's not that many co-ops. I think we're in a cooperative boom right now. I think there's tons of cooperative games now, and I think that's largely pinned on Pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were cooperatives before Pandemic. Obviously, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective was
Mm-hmm.
many years before Pandemic. There was that Lord of the Rings Kinesia game.
Mm-hmm.
There was I think Arkham Horror was before
Right.
Pandemic. Magic Realm. There's a lot of them, but I think Pandemic popularized it because I think it got away from like these RPG like roots,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it feels more like a board game that you're fighting this cardboard opponent with, and it was distilled in such a way that it was very easily accessible. And the template that Pandemic used back then is still used in cooperatives, which is that whole, you take your actions, the board gets its action to do bad things. The next player takes their action, the board does bad things to you. And I think post-Pandemic, we've just been in this cooperative golden age, in my opinion. I think you can't shake a stick in a board game store without hitting a cooperative game.
Yeah, they've definitely exploded recently, but I think part of what we're doing is basically, so far we've been looking at games that have popularized gaming in general. Kind of, so the things we've looked at so far are the things that have kind of caused the board game renaissance, I think. There were games before it, like cooperative games and popular games before, but the games that we're looking at in this series seem to be, to me anyway, to be the games that have launched the board game craze that we're in right now. And Pandemic is certainly the one that caused the most interest in cooperative games.
Personally, I find that I tend to be much more engaged with those types of games. I think for both of you guys, you don't prefer cooperative games. Correct me if I'm
I like cooperative games. I know Greg's not a big fan of them, but
Yeah, they
yeah, I
tend
like
not
them.
to rank. They don't tend to rank very high for me. That's true.
Yeah, right.
I do
And
think that people who don't like board games usually, like that board games aren't their thing. Like
Mhm.
Micah, board games really aren't your thing.
Mhm.
But m- cooperative board games appeal to that kind of player more so than I would expect.
Yeah,
I find
I
there's a group.
go
There's
ahead.
a group of people, of newer players, who don't like the competition of board games.
Hmm.
And the whole reason I own Pandemic is because if people say that, I go, well, let me show you this game where you don't need to compete. You're all fighting together against the board. And some people like that feeling. Yeah. I like the competition of a game. I like the cutthroatness that comes with it. That's why I don't tend to like co-ops. Plus, I find cooperative games to be dumb opponents
Mm.
in general. So I could go into a long rant on that, but yeah.
Well, I mean, now would be the time for it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is not negative against Pandemic in general, but in general, the reason I like cooperative games, the reason why they're never going to rate super high to me is, let's say we have a weakness. There's a city that's about to outbreak. An opponent, a human opponent, will see that weakness and attack it. And I like that about a human opponent. I can't have any weaknesses in my plan because a human opponent's going to try to outthink me. But with a cooperative opponent, you're playing against a board game, you're just flipping a card.
Mhm.
And it could be a card that just says, put a cube here where it doesn't matter. And I'm like, well, that's a dumb opponent.
Mhm.
Because it's just cardboard, right? You can't simulate all the intricacies of a human opponent with cardboard. So that's the main reason I feel like it's just uh, not making clever decisions back at me. And I don't get the response that I like from human opponents.
One thing about that though is that's another reason why the theme of Pandemic is great, because viruses aren't people, and so it does get that. Whereas, like, you're right, I would, if I was playing Pandemic and the viruses were controlled by another player, like if it was an opposed kind of thing, I would cry foul, being like, you know, no virus would know to outbreak right there. Of course it's going to outbreak, so the mindlessness of it suits the theme.
Sure, but that's assuming that I play for theme,
Right.
which I
That's
don't.
true. Yeah, you don't.
Right. Well, and so yeah, and another question I had was sort of, if you look at that game, do you think that it was, uh, I mean, it seems to me like it was a co-op first, and then they found a theme that they could make into something cooperative as
For
opposed to,
Pandemic?
yeah, but I don't know.
Oh no, it started with the SARS outbreak.
Okay.
That's what inspired it. Leacock was inspired by he built it around the epidemic, the pandemic first.
So, Greg, going along with what you said, the other thing I think though that I noticed with it is, which good or bad, is the weight of the game. It's not a really heavy game, right?
No,
Like it's
not at
pretty,
all.
it's pretty teachable to people. You can have people over who have never played anything and are not really um, super keen on games with tons of rules and lots of
Yeah,
detail. And it's very easy to teach. The actions you take in the game are pretty simple. And the things that the board can do to your point, um, the things that the board can do to you are not really complicated. It can ratchet up the difficulty by just throwing more of those things at you, I guess. But
yeah,
um,
yeah. It's not to say that Pandemic is an easy game to beat,
no.
but it's just arbitrary difficulty is what I would say. But to the point of its accessibility, I 100% agree with that. And that's actually one of the nice things of cooperative games, like Pandemic, where all the information is open, is even if the players don't understand all the rules, because you're playing it cooperatively, you can tell them, you can do this, this, and this. You can explain the rules as you go, Whereas with a competitive game, that's much more difficult to do. You can't say, "Let me see your hand. I'll tell you what you can do against me." You know, it's
Right.
with a cooperative game, it's all cooperative anyways, so it's easy to teach while you're playing.
Right. Right. So let's talk then a little bit about the mechanics. First of all, so when you guys played, did you win? Did you beat the board?
No, we lost by. How did we lose? We lost by outbreaks. We lost by outbreaks.
We lost by outbreaks. I
We
find that's
had
the
three
most common way
cures.
I lose.
We had 3 cures. We needed one more. We needed to cure yellow, and it didn't work out. I blame Greg.
Sure.
Probably justified.
Okay, so all right. So mechanically, then, as you look at any of you played in the past, what do you try to do, or what general sort of strategies do you adopt, or is it impossible to say until you get the board in front of you?
I would say, again, if we're talking about how it feels to play, I think it's a constant balance between two issues. To win the game, you have to have all 4 diseases cured. But working towards that goal doesn't really help you with the crises that are appearing across the board. So you kind of have to figure out, do I deal with this crisis that's happening right now in this part of the world that's not going to help me do anything with curing? Because ingeniously, I think, you have to collect 5 cards of the same color, for example, to cure the disease. However, you can use those cards to fly across the board quicker. So it's saying, is it worth me playing this one card that I could use to cure the disease to get to this section of the world to deal with this crisis that's happening here? And the whole game has that balance. Do I deal with
Game
it
of hard
now?
decisions.
Yeah, it's a hard decision. Do I deal with it now, or do I work towards the long game? And that's, to me, the feel of the game.
As far as how you take a turn, you basically, as we mentioned, you just, when it's your turn, you take 4 actions. And those actions are movement actions, or curing a disease action, or finding a cure, or giving cards to other players, but that's really hard to do. And then after your 4 actions are done, the board gets a turn, and what the board does is it populates more disease cubes on the board. No city can have more than 3. So if that city comes up again, then it colloquially it pops, and it sends its diseases to all adjoining cities. And in my opinion, the most ingenious mechanic of the game is the way it handles the epidemic or the disease deck. Because the decks, I don't know how many cards are in the disease deck, but it's 1 card for each city on the board. And as you go through those cards, they'll be generating diseases. But then you're going to hit a card that's in a different deck. You're going to hit a card that says epidemic, and that means you take all the cards in the discard pile, shuffle them up, and put them back on the top of the draw pile. So what that does is that all the cards you've already seen, those are the ones that are going to be coming back, and it's really stressful when that happens. So that part, when an epidemic happens, and you have to take all these things you've been working on, you've been fixing, you've been curing diseases, you've made so much progress, and now all that stuff goes back on the top of the deck in a randomized order. I love that mechanic.
Now, let me ask you about this. So you guys played. How many people were in the game that you played? It wasn't just the 2 of you, right? You got some other people. Is that right?
It was just the 2 of us.
The game we played this week was 2, but I played a couple of 4-player games also. 4-player and a 3-player game this week. So I played all the player counts.
Okay, so here's my question then. Because the roles are different, I've played a few games where I feel like kind of been at a disadvantage because of the roles that get selected. It seems like it seems like that would be a challenge to have those roles balanced so that the game still worked and was playable with different combinations as you get smaller and smaller groups if you don't have all of the roles filled. Did you guys have any difficulty as far as that went?
Well, I've always felt that 2-player Pandemic was easier than 4-player, because you're able to plan moves and coordinate much more efficiently with only 2 players. the game automatically scales up its difficulty depending on player count, because after every player, you're going to have the board's going to take its turn. So it's kind of automatically balanced in that way. But just for logistic purposes, I think it's easier for two people to coordinate what they're able to do than for four people. That having been said, we didn't succeed, and I think part of that is that in the past, I played this game a lot, but in the past, I've played where you choose your roles, and that's not actually
Particularly helpful.
well, no, that's incredibly helpful. Like,
I was
and
gonna say.
that's one of my negatives of the game. I think that when you are given a chance to choose a role, there are certain roles that are objectively better than other roles.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, I don't think that there's great balance in the game. If you choose to go by the rule book and you take your roles randomly, you can end up at a disadvantage. And I think Greg and I did. We got a couple of roles that were not awesome. We could move around the board like crazy, but we couldn't cure stuff that great. So,
Okay. Greg, you have any thoughts on the way the roles are used?
Yeah, I mean they're random. Some are, I think, are clearly better than others, but in this kind of a game, it doesn't really bother me. I mean, the whole game is pretty random to start with. But I like getting into different roles and trying to figure out, okay, how do we make this work? And I think it's winnable with all the different roles. I don't think it's like you get these two roles, well, I might as well just pack up the game. We can't win this. I think they're all winnable. But yeah, there's some roles that are clearly better than others, I feel.
Okay, good. So, all right. Well, let's talk then about, first of all, what do you guys think that Pandemic did right? Let's start with Eric, maybe.
it's really fun. It doesn't take too long to play. The setup and breakdown is even that's kind of enjoyable. Populating disease cubes on a city, is fun. There's stories that come out of it. I always enjoy people talking about especially in a higher player count game, kind of coming up with little stories that. So in that sense, it's another. It fits that role of a game that can get a lot of table time with family and friends. It can generate stories and a lot of fun. It gets its theme right, and it gets its balance. Well, actually, I want to hold off on balance because I think that's actually
On the other side of the
stays,
ledger.
well, I don't know because it's always a challenge. How about that? It's always challenging to succeed. It's almost always challenging to succeed at Pandemic. That's either good or bad, and when we get to the bad stuff, I'll talk about that.
Okay. All right. Greg, what do you think? What did it do right?
So I don't want to come across like I hate cooperative games.
Yeah.
But with the cooperative with the cooperative genre, I actually like Pandemic. Out of that, and there's a reason. And Eric's used the word puzzly to describe both Catan and Carcassonne, I believe, so far.
Mm-hmm.
But Pandemic is the
Carcassonne
first time.
more, but yeah.
Pandemic is the first time I would actually use that word. Personally, for me, Pandemic is a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always that, and I like that. There's always that moment in Pandemic where you're coming down to the last few turns, and everyone just puts their heads together, and they're like, "Look, if you go here, you do this, and I use this card, and you go here. I think we can win." I think the puzzle has just enough depth. It's not overly complicated. It's not too simple. Where it creates that nice puzzly feel where you're trying to work out the last few turns. And that's the other good thing about Pandemic. I think Eric was touching on this with balance. I think Pandemic always feels like it comes down to the last few turns. I mean, I've had blowout wins and blowout losses before, but most of the time, it comes down to like, man, if I just had one more turn, I could have beat that.
Mm-hmm.
Or man, that was a really tight game, but we pulled it off.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a master in game design that he was able to make it that balanced that it always feels tense at the end. And three, I think we talked about this previously, but it is accessible. It's the kind of game that if people don't play board games, I put down a game and tell them that, hey, you're playing against the game. We're all working together. People are impressed with that a lot of times. And Pandemic is still one that I'll use for the cooperative genre. I'll recommend Pandemic for that. So yeah, those are things I think it does well.
And I agree with that. I still own it for that reason too. It doesn't get a lot of playtime, but I've played it so much, and I've introduced it to so many people who had such a good time with it. It's always going to stay on my shelf anyway. Not, assuming nothing else comes up to beat it, just because it's so good at introducing people to board games.
What did it? So let's go on into what did it not do right? What did it get wrong, Greg?
So I'm going to go kind of on a. Pandemic is a specific type of cooperative game. I categorize cooperative games in two ways in my head. There's the ones where basically all the information is open, and it really could be played by one person, but you're just divvying up the roles. So Pandemic is that way. I could play it solo, play 4 roles, and I don't think it would play that differently because there's no hidden information. Then there's cooperative games that try to obfuscate information and separate it among players so that you have to play the information that you have and it's incomplete. So the problem that I have with Pandemic being that open information type of game, okay, I'm going to go off on I'm going to present an argument that's often leveled at Pandemic.
Yeah.
There's a counter argument to this argument that I'm aware of, but I'm going to present the counter argument to that counter argument. So give me a second.
I think I know where you're going with this. So, but
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the thing that's leveled at Pandemic often is the alpha player problem. And for those that don't know, an alpha player is a person who basically, because they see everyone, you know what's going on the board. You can see what people are doing. You just tell everyone, no, you go here, you go here, you go here. And no one's playing the game. Basically, you got one person just telling people what to do. Now, the argument against that, the counter argument against that is, well, that's not a game problem. That's a group problem. And I agree with that, right? You shouldn't be a jerk. Let people play their game, right? I mean, why be all alpha gamery on people? I agree with that. But then that presents this dilemma for me. So let's say I bring out Pandemic, 3 new people don't play board games, and now we're getting into some tough decisions. And they look and they say, what should I do? Well, here's the guy who owns Pandemics, played it multiple times. He knows all the rules. He's got a wall of board games. He knows what to do, right? So what do I do in that situation? Do I just tell them all what to do because I've played Pandemic enough? Or do I hold myself back and think about it halfway because I don't want to be an alpha gamer, right? So therefore, I'm stuck between 2 unpleasant options. Either I be the alpha gamer, I enjoy the game I want because I can just put my full brain into it. I can say, oh man, if we do this, we do this, we do this, it's going to be amazing. And then I just ruined everyone else's night. Or do what I normally do and hold myself back, don't involve myself in the puzzle as much as I want to be involved in it because I don't want to tell people what to do, right? And because that's one of the issues I have with Pandemic, with new players. Now, with a group of people who are well-versed in Pandemic, they can sing. But I don't usually pull up Pandemic for people who play a lot of Pandemic.
Right.
I bring it out for new people.
Oh, you like Pandemic? No, sorry. We're not playing that tonight.
Well, it's a game I think of. This is a game I pull out for new people. But when it's new people, they kind of look to me to be the person that leads them. But I don't want to be that person. And that's just kind of I don't know. Anytime I got to hold back the puzzle solving in a board game, which is the whole reason I play board games, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth sometimes. Any of the games that have that open information aspect in cooperative games faces that issue for me.
Right. Well, that was going to be my question. Is that a Pandemic issue or is that a co-op game issue? I mean, how does it's sort of a weird thing because there's I don't think that it's a good design if it's asking you to simultaneously do contradictory things like that. And that's not the same thing as sort of what Eric was talking about or what you were talking about balance, about you have 2 goals and you've got to pursue one a little bit and then pursue another one a little bit. But I think that sometimes, it's not good for the game to say, try to solve the puzzle, except then sometimes don't. Right?
Yeah. That's only if you have players who are just not familiar with the game, right? It's no fault of their own. It's not like they're stupid or anything. It's
Right.
that they don't know the game, and Pandemic presents this really complicated puzzle to solve.
Mhm.
They're like, oh, well, who are you going to turn to but the guy who has like a billion board games, right? So that's just kind of the natural role you end up taking in this game.
Sure. But I'm wondering, like, because you said the alternative to that would be because the alpha player can exist because he can see everything and he can factor everything in because of no hidden information, right? And on the other hand, if you do have hidden information, that also, to me, in a way, and this is maybe off topic a little bit, but that also seems slightly contradictory, because if we're cooperating, it seems strange that we should be able to communicate some things and then hold back and not communicate other things.
Yeah,
Um,
and
it's that
I
same
like
sort of contradictory thing, where it's asking us to do something sometimes, but then for the sake of making the game harder, just throttle back on this thing we're doing sort of arbitrarily.
well, the only way I see cooperative games make that work is to limit communication.
Is to what?
Limit communication.
Mhm.
And I tell you what, an example of a game that I've been using more often lately as the entry-level cooperative game is The Crew.
Mhm.
It's a good game for anyone who's played trick taking. I would introduce that game because there's a lot of cooperative games that do this. I have my information and each person has their information, so I can't think about their problem. I can't give them advice on their problem. I can only look at what I have and play the best that I can. And then I'm back at that point where I can 100% think about my puzzle. I don't have to hold back and just hope everyone else is dealing with their puzzle. That I enjoy a little bit more, but I agree that taking out that communication takes away some of the appeal of a cooperative game.
Mhm.
Because some of my favorite moments in Pandemic is when we sit down, we all talking together, trying to figure out the puzzle together. So, I mean, I don't know that there's a 100% perfect solution to that. I think that's just the nature of cooperative games.
Right. So let's go ahead and go to Eric then. Eric, what do you think that Pandemic did not do correctly?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is an interesting game because I agree with almost everything Greg said, and I still don't like it.
Yeah.
I still disagree with him.
Hey,
You still
truth.
don't like
I mean,
Greg.
sometimes truth is hard to take. What can I say?
Truth hurts. It does. It's true. No. Actually, I do agree with almost everything Greg said. It's a weird game because you do have that the alpha gamer is a problem. The alpha gamer is a problem in Pandemic. So how do you deal with that? Do you deal with that on a board game level, or do you deal with that on a social contract level? Those are your two options. So in some ways, I think that Pandemic is fine the way it is, because you can't micromanage everybody. You can't say, okay, look, you can't run other people, you can't tell people what to do, and you can't ask for help on your turn. You just got to figure it out. That would ruin the game.
Right.
In fact, part of the reason that I think this is a good stepping stone game, or a good game for new people, is because they can sit at the board, at the table, and be like, man, I don't know what to do. Greg, you've played this a million times. Tell me what to do. And they still have a good time,
Mhm.
but they all get to enjoy the victory together, but they don't feel the pressure, the hot seat of sitting there and having to fuss it over. Now it becomes a problem. The only time it becomes a problem is if I, the new player, want to sit and figure it out, and Greg, the alpha gamer who's played it a million times, is like, no, you're doing it wrong. You need to do it this way.
Mhm.
Well, the board game can't compensate for that. That's a player problem. So there's that. The only thing I can say that I think could mitigate that is if you're going to be playing with some type A personalities, play with concealed hands for your cards. So all that does.
This is a topic I want to talk about.
I
We'll
know.
come back to this.
We were gonna we talked about that. It doesn't stop the problem because you can still talk about it, but people are going to have there's going to be a buffer there. There's going to be like, well,
Because they
I
can't
can't
perfectly remember everyone's
they can't
hand.
perfectly remember it, and
Work
so
on
there's
the
going to have to
problem.
be conversation, and it kind of diffuses that a little bit, in my opinion. So the original rules said that your hands were concealed,
Mhm.
and then that changed later, where your hands were open for everyone. Most people, when they played Pandemic, played with open hands anyway.
Yeah.
But originally it was concealed hands, and I like to play according to the written rules. So when we started playing, I was playing concealed hands, and then people would be like, "Well, why don't you play with open hands?" And I fought against it. And having done that, I can see the benefit of both sides. So I can see why you would want to have open hands in a perfectly, if everybody's cool. But if you've got the alpha gamer problem, where somebody wants to play their own hand, play their own turn, I should say, and somebody is going to alpha game it, you can try to mitigate that by having a concealed hand.
Does the new rulebook say open hands? I thought that was just
I
Pandemic Legacy.
could have been could be Legacy. Yeah.
I think Legacy is the one that says open hands. I think
Does
I could be
revised?
wrong, but I think there's the normal Pandemic still says concealed hands.
Oh, does it? Okay.
I believe it does. I could be wrong. Oh, but I got a couple things to talk about there. So one, I agree with what he just said, and I want to make the point clear. I try my hardest not to be the alpha gamer, right?
Mhm.
It's just a matter of I have to bite my tongue to not be the alpha gamer, and I don't like having, you know what I mean? I don't like not being involved in the puzzle because I don't want to be an alpha gamer.
Yeah, you're fighting against your own belligerent personality.
Basically, yes, that's
Right.
it. No, but it's just because I played the
we
game
appreciate
more.
it.
Yes, you guys better be grateful that I'm constantly holding myself back. You would not like to see me. No.
Sure.
You wouldn't
but
like me when I'm alpha gamer.
That's right. Yeah, it's just because I've played the game more often. It's just I see the puzzles a little more naturally than a brand new player would often. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I've seen kids come up and go, "Why don't you do this?" And it's like the perfect plan. That happens. I'm not saying like I'm always going to have the right answer, but more often than not, I can see. Okay, I know we need to take care of this issue because in games past, if you don't take care of this issue, it's going to become a big deal,
Yeah.
right?
Obviously,
And
experience is going to make a difference. Why would it not?
experience will make a difference. And so the fact that I can't always just point that out, I don't want to feel like I'm alpha gaming, so I have to hold that back. Anytime I'm holding, it's like in a competitive game, I can just go all in. I can just 100% do what I enjoy, and that's just solve the issue, solve the puzzle that's in front of me.
Yeah, crush those noobs.
That's right. I don't mind crushing a noob. That doesn't bother me at all.
Sure.
Put a 5-year-old kid in a game with me, he's going to learn a life lesson.
But I agree with all that, and I think that when you're playing, that's fine. It's just it's a very specific situation when you've got one player who's new, who doesn't really grok the rules that well, but wants to figure it out, and then you've got somebody trying to micromanage his turns. I think that having concealed hands helps diffuse that situation.
Right.
Now you could say, why play with that person? And my response is, you can't always choose who you're going to play with. Sometimes your groups are your groups. So like you can't put it on the group always. You can't always put it on the board game. There needs to be some middle ground there. And I think one way to do that is with concealed hands.
Okay, so let's talk about the concealed hands. Because I agree that, I do agree, alpha gaming, you should not do that. That's an issue. That's a person problem. At the end of the day, it's a social gathering. You should read the social situation, the vibe of the room, and not become an alpha gamer where you're just annoying people. But let's talk about this concealed hand. So, I don't like the concealed hands in Pandemic, and here's why. And this isn't even. So I know you're thinking I want to talk about hidden trackable information.
No, I
Okay, because I know this is something that
I never presume to know what's going to come out of your mouth, Greg.
Okay, so what people don't understand, there's this thing called hidden trackable information, and that is information that the game says has to remain hidden, but theoretically you could track it.
You viewers at home, this is going to come up a lot.
No, it's not, because
up.
No, hold on, because I'm actually neutral on that topic.
So an example would be counting cards. like at a casino in blackjack. You could theoretically, even though they go, they go into a discard pile or something like that, if they've come out and you've seen, theoretically, if you had a photographic memory, you could remember them.
Anything
I
that is
suppose
trackable.
anything that's trackable. If I could track it, so if, for example, let's say a lot of times they say your money is hidden, but if I know you started with $20, okay, and you spent $5 there, and you got $7 here, I can just do the math in my head, and keep track of how much money you have, hidden or not. Now, some people say if it's hidden trackable information, then it should just be left in the open because memory is not a very interesting skill to be testing. It's just obfuscating some valuable information. If it's trackable, leave it in the open. Now, okay, now I just want to point out, I don't agree or disagree with that position. And I'm getting into Pandemic because I don't think Pandemic is actually hidden trackable information. So if someone says, we play with our money open, we play with our money closed, I can play either way. I don't care. Maybe if it's my own game, I'd prefer to have it open, but I don't really care that much. The problem with Pandemic, though, is it's what I call hidden researchable information. And here's the problem. Because with Pandemic, you're allowed to talk about your hand. I can say, Eric, what's in your hand? And you can say, oh, well, I got Delhi, New York, and Toronto. So it's not really hidden at all. So all I got to do is ask you what's in your hand. So the only reason the concealed hands are a thing, in my opinion, is just to delay the information getting to me.
Yeah, well,
which is annoying.
It's spreading things out a little bit. It's making it, like Micah said, it's making it a little harder for the alpha gamer to alpha game.
I think it'd be similar to saying we put cubes over here in this city, and we're going to take a cup and put it upside down so you can't see it. And so now to see where the cubes are, you got to lift up the cup and look, and lift up the cup and look.
It's not. But in that situation, the problem is not the alpha gamer trying to run the board. The board's running itself. The alpha gamer is trying to run another player.
But I can ask you what's in your hand.
Yeah, that's fine. Do it. I would tell you.
You'll tell me what's in your hand.
Yeah.
And now I know what's in your hand.
Yes, I know that. I know. But
how does that stop the alpha gamer except make him talk longer?
You realize that it just kind of makes it a little harder on the alpha gamer to
remember three cards.
Yeah, or 5, 6, 7. You can have a hand of 7. I'm just saying. I don't think it's a perfect solution. And ultimately, the best solution would be to say, well, we're not going to play with that guy anymore. But you can't always do that in social situations. Maybe you're married to the guy. Who knows? But I think that it does it gives a nod toward kind of making it a little harder for the alpha gamer to alpha game. That's all. I'm not saying it's a perfect solution. I'm just saying that it's doing something to address it.
And maybe it is, but I feel like what it's doing to address the alpha gamer, which I don't play with alpha gamers, it's just making
you are the alpha
games.
Yeah, we do.
I'm not the alpha gamer. I don't alpha game. I promise. I don't alpha game.
Here's another way to do it. Here's another way to do it. If you're playing with an alpha gamer, here's a little additional rule. Whenever the alpha gamer tries to run your turn, just kick him in the testicles. Makes it a little harder for him to do it.
No, you're missing my point, because what I'm saying is I'm not talking about the alpha gamer anymore, because like I said, I don't play with the alpha gamer. I don't have alpha gamer friends. It's that rule is just making it more difficult for my group. If I play with that rule all the time, now we just got this weird.
No, I'm saying you don't have to play with that rule. You don't have to.
I know.
I'm saying
so you're just saying, hey, you look like a jerk, therefore we're going to play with this rule.
Yeah. Yes. Effectively, like if you're stuck with a group where one guy wants to run the entire table, and nobody else, and maybe he's really good at Pandemic, and that's his problem. See, it's not as far-fetched as it seems. Like somebody who's really good at the game wants to run the game himself, but the other players don't like that. Just enforce the rule that's in Pandemic that says that the rule as written in Pandemic that says your hand is concealed. I think that's cool.
Think, one, it's a minor speed bump for them, and two, if I have to play with this jerk, I would pull it a different game.
Yeah, sure.
If I know this person
we're
has
talking
a
about
problem,
Pandemic today, so
I know, but I'm just saying that Pandemic would not be my choice to begin with.
No, granted.
You know what I mean?
And that's why, actually, the reason we're talking about this is because Micah asked me to talk about things I don't like about the game, and this is one of them. So the alpha gamer problem, which doesn't have an easy solution, I think it's one of the downsides of the game. And maybe, like you said, it's a downside of all cooperative games. I think when it comes to cooperative games that are completely random, like dice based, that's not a problem. But in a game like Pandemic, yeah, it can be an issue. I have another problem.
It's
It
a
is, yeah.
specific type of cooperative. I mean, because there's things like
Yes.
Hanabi, the Mine, the
Right.
game, the crew.
By the
that
way,
doesn't have that
shout
issue.
out to the crew. That's a fantastic cooperative game.
It is good.
We're never going to get to it probably, but that's a great game. I have another problem with Pandemic, if I may, Micah.
By all means.
Okay. Again, this is one of those weird I hinted at it when I was talking about the good stuff. Part of the good things of Pandemic is that it's always tense. One of the bad things about Pandemic is that it's always tense, no matter how many times you've played it. I think you can, and this is maybe just personal preference, when I've played a game 50 times, I want to win 85, 90% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And with Pandemic, the best you're going to get is like 60, 65%, because the board's still going to whoop you frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't like that. Maybe that's a good thing if you're getting together and you want, the point is you want to feel that tension. But I like to get good at games, and Pandemic is not a game that I feel like I can get good at. The randomness is too high.
I think I tend to agree with that. And one of the things, another issue I kind of have with cooperative games in general, from personal opinion, is when I do beat the game the first time, I feel I'm good. It's like I beat it. Okay, I solved that problem. But I often wonder with these cooperative games, and Pandemic is one. I'm sure the deck has a certain order that it can be in that just creates an unwinnable game, even if you're playing perfectly, right? I'm sure that's an issue. I'm not saying that's a bad issue. I'm not ready to put that as a negative, because I think that's just the nature of cooperative games. But I could see that being an issue, yes.
Yeah, well, and there's certainly no guarantee that a similar type of scenario couldn't happen in a competitive game where there are random elements that make it such that you essentially.
Yeah, I don't think this is a situation that is specific to Pandemic. I think that Pandemic is just an example of a type of problem that I don't like. I like to, if I've played a game a bunch, I want to be able to quote unquote master it as much as possible.
Well, it seems like sort of a common theme here is the relationship that Pandemic has with new players versus experienced players. I think that Eric, would you agree? I think Greg said that he felt like the alpha gamer problem goes away when you're playing with people that are experienced and have played before. Would you agree with that by and large?
No, I would say that the alpha gamer problem goes away when you play with cool people.
Okay. So
like if you can, the people who have played a lot, they might still be the alpha gamer.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you.
But I think it tends to die down more if you have. I mean, again, I think we're going a difference between an experienced player and an alpha gamer. I agree, there's a difference. An alpha gamer is probably a personality problem, whereas an experienced gamer, which is probably more what I was talking about, is just I know the game better than the other people at the table. So I guess I would say that issue goes away when everyone's experienced, but there's no alpha gamer. Because I find this game just sings when you got 4 experienced players. And then you can go in and say, hey, you should do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And
No,
that
that's
person
great.
can come back and say, no, I disagree. I think we should do this, this, and this. And
some of the best games I've had of Pandemic is actually with what I'd call beta gamers. It's probably an actual term, I don't know, where they're asking for help all the time. But Pandemic still works because they're not there. They're there to have a fun time with all the people. They're not really there for the board game, but they're there to, they're having a good time at it. It's very passive. And so they have a good time when asking for help. That's fine. If you're asking for help, I think Pandemic is a great game to play. If you are trying to run other people's turns, you shouldn't be playing Pandemic.
So that actually makes me think of something, Eric. To your negative about how you can always, it's always potentially an option that you could lose a game of Pandemic, no matter how great you get at it. But I would say that I think I probably fall in this category myself. The reason why I would want to play Pandemic and be drawn to it, and or might pick a cooperative game in general as opposed to a competitive one, is because what I like about playing the game is not the feeling of addressing a global crisis or any of the theme stuff. I like the interaction between the players. I like group problem solving. I don't really care. At the end of the day, personally, I don't feel competitive with the board. I don't. If if we win, we win. If we lose, we lose. If I feel like we had a good time interacting and thinking about different options and working on things, and someone saying, "Oh, well, oh, that's right, my guy can do this. I forgot about that. Okay, how can we factor that in?" Then that's the type of thing that, for me, brings me to the table. And so, because of that, I'm not even so personally invested in the exact outcome of it, as opposed to just the way the group dynamic is while we're playing.
Oh yeah, and I think the Pandemic is a perfect game for you because of that very reason. Because you're the kind of player who would want to have a nice time with his friends and occasionally be like, figure out what you can do on your turn. And it's not a big deal whether you win or lose. And it's the 40-60 spread of winning, if you're really good at the game, means that it's still tense even
Mhm.
all the way up to the very end. And I think that Pandemic is a great game for that. For that reason, I think Pandemic is a great game. It's
Mhm.
just,
Yeah, I
I
just
don't think
asked you
it's a
about
great
negative,
game.
so you got to say something.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a great game for people who play it all the time. It seems
Right.
it's kind of strange, but like people who if you sit down and this is your game,
Hmm.
well, you're still going to lose 40% of the time, and maybe that's, maybe it's your game because you're just a social player. That's fine. That's
Yeah,
what the game's built for.
yeah. I
That's
think I
funny.
see where Micah's coming from because I also don't really need to win or lose this game. I agree, and this is going back to my positives. I agree that to me the highlight of Pandemic is when you're sitting there and you're hashing over this problem with the group. I love that feeling in this game, and whether you succeed or not doesn't really matter so much to me. I just like that feeling of solving that puzzle. I think that's its strength personally.
All right. So, any final thoughts on Pandemic then? Anything you want to say about it you haven't gotten to say yet, Eric?
Nothing that I haven't said already, but I think this is a really, really good game. I think I think that it is a very good casual game and a great game for new people. Um, Honestly, I'm not going to get rid of this game anytime soon off my personal shelf, and I know a lot of people. I think all three of us own it. That speaks to it. Like all three of us are very different gamers, and we each own this game. So it's a great game for that reason alone.
Right. Greg, anything further?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to sound like I'm hating on Pandemic or all co-ops because I actually do enjoy this game. I would probably give it a 7, which is what
Hmm.
I gave Catan. I rated it a little bit higher than Carcassonne,
Hmm.
um, mostly because it's so puzzly, and I love puzzly games. I love that feeling at the end where you're just trying to map out that's a great feeling to me when it works. And in the right group, this game is perfect for that, for a cooperative game. I do think there's some other cooperative games that I would bring out a little more often nowadays with the new group. Um, but yeah, I mean, it still has its place. I'll probably keep Pandemic for a while. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, very nice. Well, so there you have it. If you haven't had a chance to play Pandemic, you definitely should. Good game, a lot of fun. Good way to get get a group, even those that maybe haven't played a lot of board games, you want something to do, give Pandemic a try. Pretty easy to get into. What is going to be next for us, guys? What do you guys want to play next?
Seven Wonders is next on the list.
Seven Wonders. Okay. All right. Well, we'll look forward to that. And until then, I don't know. I feel like I need to have a tagline to say at the end of these things. But
That should be your tagline. I feel like I need to have a
Boo-doop-a-doop,
tagline.
Yeah. All right. But this has been a piece of the action. Thanks a lot.
Harvesting.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the one where was that the apple? The
Yeah.
one where they had to go to that giant idol thing and jump into it? And they had to sacrifice?
Oh, no. Was that Landrew? I thought Landrew was.
There's so many giant
I
machines
know.
that suck up people in Star Trek.
Yeah,
season
I
two.
don't think that was the apple.
But I'm
I'll
going to
check
say
it out.
absorbing, just to be different. I'm going to say absorbing.
Absorbing.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's see. I'll put in harvesting because it was the first guess, and then I'll tell you what the answer is. So we're gonna go with harvesting. Harvesting is wrong, and the correct answer was absorbing. I'm curious, actually, what episode that was. Landrew sounds familiar. Star Trek.
Andrew. The Return of the Archons
There you go.
is the one.
What's it about?
I'm looking at it now. 19th century Earth-style culture. Oh, that was the one where they went down and they were all walking. Everyone's walking like quietly down the street, and like.
Or they had
19th
like
century.
there was guys in like the hoods, right?
I remember the hoods, but I remember that was like the streets were empty and everyone seemed super peaceful, and it was like the lawgivers and land. Yes, I remember. I'm vaguely remembering this now. It was in the first season.
I remember Landrew coming up, but I don't
That's
remember enjoying
They
it.
would come up and talk to you and say, "Are you? Was like, are you with the body or something like that?"
Hmm.
That was the question everyone asked.
Yeah.
And so they got absorbed into the body. That's what it was.
It sounds great.
It's vaguely coming back now.
Being part of the body.
Being part of the body. What's wrong with that?
Right.
I enjoy the body.
Sure.